Now, if that is the case, I think that's what we should give serious attention to. I've looked through the whole of this agenda, and I don't see any reference to stop and search or stop and account, except on the supplement. It mentions how Operation Devonport is doing, and there it does say, and I quote, one of the performance indicators is number of stop and searches undertaken in relation to cross-border crime. Well, cross-border crime isn't all the crime in this county, far from it. If it's only emphasised on cross-border activities, then I feel it should be similarly emphasised in our towns and cities, particularly those which have the highest crime records. So I do feel, Chairman, that we should encourage the use of stop and search. It's an absolutely vital tool in crime prevention, and our police should be encouraged, not discouraged, from using it with discretion. It doesn't have to be a physical search. It can be done with a wand, or even a stop and account, which is a milder form of stop and search. But I do think it's absolutely vital that this tool should be used and encouraged to be used.
Who wants to come back on that?
Would you like to, Becky? Or
Yeah.
I'll take that one. Stop and search is a controversial technique. And certainly as far as the government's concerned, I mean, the Home Office have focused on this very much over the last year, and the inappropriate use of stop and search, because not particularly in Warwickshire, but in other areas around the country, it has been clearly demonstrated to be effectively racist in a lot of areas. There's the number of stop and searches done to BME, members of the BME community, way out of proportion to any convictions achieved by it. And that's why it's become under so much scrutiny. Having said that, what I have done is kept my eye very closely on what the situation is in Warwickshire and asked the question, and if you look even in Warwickshire, the proportion is still disproportionate. But I am absolutely satisfied that and I've asked this question a number of times to the Chief Constable, that where it is disproportionate, it is being done for good reason. I think it became used, it wasn't as effective as a technique as it could be. And I went to a briefing that was given to the Independent Advisory Group about the changes to stop and search. One of the things that was causing a great deal of frustration was the amount of time it took to conduct one of these exercises. The paperwork was extremely lengthy, and you would detain people for sort of 30-35 minutes and in the end get very little out of it. Now it's become a much quicker process, much more concise, and actually is producing better intelligence within Warwickshire. So, and having said that, there is no evidence that I know of that it is making in any way the more targeted use of stop and search is in any way contributing to the figures as far as violence against the person are concerned. The reason we say it's not clear is because there are a number of factors going on at the same time. There was the changes in crime recording that the HMIC picked up. So that has of itself meant that different procedures are being used for recording crime, and that's what one of the examples was what Becky referred to there. So it is at this stage, we're not able to say that the increase is down to specific factors A or B, because there's been an increase because of what the HMIC has done. But just looking across the country, it is something that's happening across the country. It's happening everywhere. So it is of concern. I am concerned about it, and I'm keeping my eye on it. But I would challenge the assertion. We certainly would not be able to say that stop and search has made a contributory factor to it.
Councillor Tandy?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner, one of the points that disturbed me somewhat within this report on the violence with injury offences was on the first paragraph under that, round about the second sentence, which it said that over half of all violence against the person with injury offences were recorded in the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough. Of course, I declare an interest in that, as that's where I live. That then follows on. That then follows on to the next sentence, which you've just mentioned about this is happening nationally, but in Warwickshire it seems only to be happening in one part of Warwickshire, only in Nuneaton and Bedworth. Could I ask, Commissioner, in your discussions with the Chief Constable, has he informed you of what steps he is taking to alleviate the position that we have written down here, that over half of the problems are within Nuneaton and Bedworth?
I'll pass that one on to D.L. Hewson, if that's okay, the Chief Exec.
Yeah, we cover that further down in the report, June, in terms of Operation Kingfisher. I have to say that as a group, we've only scratched the surface of the operation, and actually we are still seeking further detail around it, but there's a significant amount of operational activity in Nuneaton town in particular to counter several things. One, there's evidence of preloading with drinks by young people before they come into the town centre, and the particular evening of interest is Thursdays, when there is the student and squaddy night. So there are higher levels of recording of that those offences on those nights. In addition, historically, Nuneaton and Bedworth have been at the forefront of, unfortunately, high levels of domestic abuse, and all force resources are focused around that particular issue. It seems to be something which is particularly prevalent in the north of the county, and I include Rugby in that scenario as well. And I know the force are actively seeking ways of working with victims and providing them more significant support, but also we're initiating some work from the PCC's office to deal with the perpetrators, particularly the persistent perpetrators, with a view to try to stop the tide and turn the trend in the other direction. There's other initiatives in the town centre, particularly Martin Samuels, the superintendent up there, I've spoken to about this issue. He's described how they've increased the foot patrolling in the town centres on the Friday and Saturday night to deal with the nighttime economy, and complementing that is an extension of the Street Pastor scheme, which again is supported by the Commissioner's office, which is very effective in the town in identifying vulnerable people who potentially could be the subject of assault later in the evening. And the taxi marshalling service has just started prior to Christmas, where drunken or potentially violent individuals, before any violence takes place, are marshalled away, put into the taxis and gone. So there's a number of things going on, but I mentioned earlier, I think as we need to understand the other aspects of Operation Kingfisher, as it's called, to make sure that we're satisfied with the force, particularly in Nuneaton and Bedworth, doing everything they can to counter the kind of threats and risks and harms that we've heard about.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Mawson?
Oh, it's pretty simple. It's down there. It says analysts the number of violence with injuries, crimes in North Warwickshire. As I come from North Warwickshire, I don't see that. So I think it should be scheduled probably Northern Warwickshire, not North Warwickshire, because we're a borough, and that could then affect the people that live in North Warwickshire as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, apologies for that. Yeah.
Councillor Bowler?
Thank you, Chair. On the same note as Peter Mawson, stole my phone, but is at the Police and Crime Panel in, I think it was in Stratford upon Avon. You actually showed something else which showed South Warwickshire, North Warwickshire, and I did warn of the confusion that you would cause by doing that, because I did actually say that when Mrs. Dandy saw this, she would be, because as Peter said, when the public actually see this, they'll soon say, my God, North Warwickshire is actually increasing, but it actually is Northern Warwickshire. So I think you do have to sort of make sure that you're aiming, and it would be interesting as well on the violence on on injury offences, just the knock-on effect that this must be having on A&E. Certainly at Georgiana.
Yeah, that's in the meeting, yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, but again, so apologies
North
for
of
that.
Warwickshire might be a better description than
Yeah.
North Warwickshire,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions, points on that report? Thank you very much for that then. Item 5. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This is just really to provide the panel with an update on the last meeting of the Planning and Performance Working Group, which met on the 1st of December. So the minutes are attached for information, don't intend to go through those. The only thing I really want to flag up is that the working group next meeting on the 17th of February, and it's proposed that at that meeting they consider the panel's work programme for 2015-16. So it would be useful if members can think of priority topics or suggestions ahead of that, forward them to me, and then we can consider those at the meeting on the 17th.
As I emailed you, is we're in elections this year in May, and I'm the representative for North Warwickshire, so I could be not here in that particular time. So I can't forward you any information because I might not be there.
Okay.
It's quite difficult when there's elections.
Is there any other point on that report? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 6, report of the Budget Working Group. Robin Verso.
Chair, I think all the issues raised in this are covered on the precept item on item 7 of your agenda.
Okay. Thank you. Right then, item 7, proposed local police precept for 2015-16. Right.
Thanks, Jim. I got elected on the basis of making quite a strong case that I would be prudent in terms of the finances for Warwickshire Police are concerned. Not only for my term of office, but I inherited quite a healthy position, and I am absolutely determined that I will not leave problems either for myself or for my successor. And so that's the basis on which I do financial planning. Going around the county now, talking to members of the public, I do get asked the question, and I was asked it last week by the Independent Advisory Group meeting, about, I think the public are actually beginning to get concerned about cuts in police funding, and I am actually being asked the question, do we need to worry about this as we go into the future? And again, going back to one of the things I said during my campaign was that if ever I was put in the position where I thought we could not adequately police Warwickshire, then given the funds that we were given, that I would resign. And I would repeat that commitment. So any of the public who are concerned about that, frankly, in my view, if I am here, then my judgment is that we can do what we are supposed to be doing, what Warwickshire Police are meant to be doing. And one of the aspects that the public are really interested in is officer numbers. And that's one of the ways in which they assess whether or not we can provide adequate protection for them. And again, going back to something that I've said and I'm being consistent about, is that in terms of officer numbers, and I can only talk as far as May 2016, because that's when my term of office ends, I gave a guarantee that the officer numbers would not fall below 800 in terms of regular officers, that the PCSO numbers would not fall below 100, and that we would recruit special constables with an intention to increase the number to approximately 400. All of those have financial implications for them, but nevertheless they are commitments, and I just wanted to repeat those guarantees to the public now. So looking at the overall financial position that we have, at the moment we have good reserves. The reserves are in excess of £30 million at the moment, and as a result of this year, we are going to add to them a small amount of money and add to them. So that would no doubt lead to a perfectly logical question. Well, why then am I proposing, which is what I am proposing, to increase the police precept this year by 1.99%? And just dealing with the reserve position straight away, in terms of the plans that we have at the moment, although those reserves are healthy, in excess of £30 million, by the effect of all of the things which I will go through shortly, those reserves are, at the end of the next medium term, next 5 years, those reserves will be reduced by 2/3. So we will be down to 1/3 of the existing reserve levels. So although the reserves are looking healthy, the plans are that they will be reduced, but that will enable us to face with confidence the challenges that we have ahead of us. Has that happened? There are a couple of reasons. The alliance with West Mercia has been really successful, but one of the mistakes that they made, and I think this is acknowledged, is that they reduced the HR department too much too quickly, and so that has had really severe implications in terms of recruiting. And one of the things that's been something of an embarrassment is that we have not recruited the number of officers that I would have liked. But they've also, the Alliance has also been slow in approving capital expenditure. And so both of those factors have meant that the snapshot picture of the finances at the moment makes them look rather healthier than they should. But as I say, I would be very reluctant to be too critical of the Alliance for that, because if you look at overall performance, after what has been a really complicated process of getting the Alliance to work, that's all happened. There's been no dip in performance, and so I think we should really celebrate that rather than sit here criticising for them. And if emulation is the best form of flattery, in the last 2 weeks, Avon and Somerset and Wiltshire have just announced that they are going to adopt a similar model to the one that we have pioneered here, and they are going for a strategic alliance as well. But it has choked off expenditure. So that picture I just gave you on reserves, about going down to 1/3 of what we have now, that is based on the assumption that we are going to increase the precept to 1.99% each year over those years. So if we do not do that, that challenge becomes much more significant. So the challenge that the last comprehensive spending review gave us was that across the Alliance we have to find in excess of £30 million more in the way of cuts. Warwickshire's share of that is around about £10 million. Now those cuts are being imposed on an organisation that's already been through 150 plus all of the structural changes we've had to do with the Alliance anyway. So, and a statement of the blindingly obvious is that you can, once you've taken an organisation and made savings and started making cuts, it gets increasingly difficult to do that. But nevertheless, the scale of the challenge being given to us is not decreasing, and we have this target of a further 10. Warwickshire's share is around about £10 million to do that. If we do not increase the precept, the challenge that gives us is that the impact would be in the first year, because we would get a freeze grant, it would be the impact on the householder is the Bandee householder is about 1 penny a day. the impact to us in the first year, because of the freeze grants, would be about £350,000. If you take the entire period, there are no guarantees about freeze grants after year one, so the net effect over that 5-year period is around about in excess of £3 million, £3.1 million. So on top of the cuts that we already are going to face, we would have an additional challenge of an extra £3.1 million over that period. That is a challenge that would make life even more difficult for us. So what are we actually doing at the moment? The way the Alliance was formed, a blueprint was drawn up, and that has very largely been implemented, and we're just coming to the end of that implementation programme now. What I've done is said, what we need to do now is to effectively do an assessment of what has happened to date before embarking on the next phase of this and designing what new model we need for going to the future. So the Alliance has set up a team called the Strada team, the Strengthening and Deepening the Alliance team. What they have done is a comprehensive analysis of demand in all areas of policing across the Alliance area, and that is unique in the country. There are various forces that are doing bits of demand analysis. We are the only area in the country that has done that across the entire areas of business. That work is not yet finished. It will be finished probably by the end of March. I've had a presentation on where they've got to date, and it is an impressive piece of work. But once that is completed, we will then be in a position to start looking at how we then design a model that is going to satisfy that and going to address that. I will here mention something that an area of expenditure that I approved, and I absolutely stick by it, and that is in terms of deciding that we would have our own Chief Constable in Warwickshire. That is something that there has been a cost to. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do, and the reason I'm mentioning it here is that before that demand work gets turned into an operational plan, one of the things I've done is said to everyone in the Alliance Governance Group, the group that oversees the Alliance, and the Strada team, the people who are doing the analysis, that before the new model is designed, then what needs to happen is an assessment of what's happened to date and whether or not that has been balanced in terms of investment, in terms of location of functions, and in terms of effects on staff. So that just doing an assessment of whether the Alliance has been fair, effectively, to both contributing parties. But and then going forward, we need to ensure that that balance is maintained. So it's not just a case of saying what is the most efficient operational model. Whatever gets designed has to work operationally, and it has to work politically as well. So there needs to be, Warwickshire's interests need to be protected. And the best way to do that is to have a strong political voice and to have a strong independent operational voice. So I just wanted to explain why, make sure everyone was clear on why that decision was taken. In terms of where we are, and there are, and there have been over the last year, demands that couldn't necessarily have been predicted, and this actually is the way things are now. Just looking back over the last year, substantial amount of work and substantial costs have been generated by things like the outcome from the Savile inquiry. All sorts of issues have come out of that in terms of child sexual exploitation, historic rape cases, and that has generated a lot of work and a lot of expenditure. As we've already dealt with in this meeting, I've been a strong supporter of the formation of a MASH. There will be relatively substantial costs for that. But nevertheless, I'm slightly frustrated it's taken so long to get going. But there's been some really good work done now, and I'm confident that this time next year that we will actually be sitting here with a functioning MASH in place. The government have imposed on us, and I'm sorry that I'll put that in a slightly unfortunate way. This is not a bad thing. That victims and the support of services for victims needs to be improved. And they have made an announcement that victims need to be at the heart of everything. There's a victims code which is very specific. As so often happens with these things, we have been given a budget to provide victim services. In order to provide the service that I would be comfortable with, that budget doesn't by any means cover the cost of providing those services. So that will cost an extra around about £350,000 for us. But we will be providing services to around 16,000 victims. There's capacity to do 16,000 as opposed to the 9,000 which we did last year. So that is an additional cost. One of the things that the government have got into the habit of doing is top slicing the budget that we have. In that announcements are made about things like an innovation fund. The innovation fund isn't new money. That is money that's taken off the budget that we already have. In terms of paying for HMIC or the IPCC, again, money is being top sliced off the budget. So this ever-shrinking budget shrinks even more because of the government taking top slicing elements off. We've done a calculation that those elements alone are the equivalent of 14 police officers. So those are not insignificant sums that we're talking about here. So, as I say, the funds that we have available to us not only are being cut by what was the comprehensive spending review is the challenge that's setting us, but other demands are being taken as well. In terms of choices that we have made, and this is expenditure that I'm prepared to stand by, but we will have to review this if we do not increase the precept. Operation Devonport is a very substantial part of what's happening in Warwickshire at the moment. It's a big programme. It's a £2.5 million a year programme, providing police staff investigators targeting in a proactive way things like acquisitive crime. It's something that's not being done in West Mercia. If you look at the comparative performance between the two forces, there is clear evidence of how the money is achieving good results. And I am very grateful actually to Neil Hewson, my chief executive, who has asked some really detailed questions on this. So in terms of value for money, I'm convinced that it's a good way to go. We have given good support and good funding to the 4 excellent community safety partnerships we have in Warwickshire. I have allocated around in excess of £1 million to bids for community safety projects, and we actually had bids for £2 million, but we've only been able to satisfy about half of those. We have prioritised cybercrime, rural crime and business crime and allocating £1.5 million a year across the Alliance to those 3 areas. And across the Alliance we've put £2.6 million into protecting vulnerable people as well. So those are choices that I would need to go and review. I'm not saying we couldn't do any of them. I'm just saying that if we do not increase the precepts, I'll need to go and review those. I referred earlier, just coming to the conclusion of my remarks, you'll be pleased to know, about what the public are feeling about this. We did a public consultation, and just two aspects I'd like to refer to. We had 79 responses. 2/3 of those responding support an increase in the police precept. And when I spoke to the Independent Advisory Group last week, of around about 50 people there, I got unanimous support from the people there for a police precept increase. And it is interesting to see across the country, those that have done analysis are getting very similar results, around 2/3. I think people are beginning to feel they are concerned about reducing police budgets, whether or not the levels of protection will be able to be maintained. My absolute final point is the figures I've referred to are those the best that we have to work with now. There is a general election coming up, as I'm sure you're aware. And what's happened already is health spending is being ring-fenced. It sounds as though education budgets are going to be ring-fenced as well. That being the case, it is highly likely, I think it is highly likely, that the savings targets that we've talked about today will increase. We are fully expecting there to be another spending review after the election, and that our savings targets will actually become more difficult. So on the basis of that, I think that the prudent thing to do would be to go for the maximum increase I can without going to a referendum. So I'm sorry I've gone on at length there, but I think it is important to go through the background. Okay. And I'll obviously happily take any questions.
Well, we shall have some.
Yes.
Can I just say that because of the way the streaming is set up, it will be necessary, I think, for Ron to repeat, not word for word, repeat the question that's been put to him.
Happy, yeah.
At least the précis of the question that's been put to
yeah.
To make streaming for the public a lot easier. So first of all, I'm going to come to Councillor Crouchley.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I do have a concern over the consultation process as you've actually described it, in the fact that I think it was 85 people responded to online consultation. And my understanding is that District, Borough and County were more of an information sharing rather than what might be understood as a consultation. We've just referred to the advisory group of 50 people that actually were unanimous. That seems across the whole of Warwickshire quite a small percentage of people. I know you're referring to national sort of statistics that would imply that the population are in support. And I would actually say that I do think the population are in support of police activity. But whether they're in support of the increase in the precept is quite a specific question. And I think I'm unsure about exactly your plan of consultation, how many people and groups that included. And I would have liked to see an analysis of all the people that you have actually approached and their responses.
Okay, just to briefly do a summary of the question then. It's a concern about the level of consultation and whether or not that was a true representation. Well, the only one I referred to was the online consultation that we did, that we advertised widely. I mean, it wasn't just a case of whenever we had public meetings, or I tried to encourage people to, without actually just informing the public that it's there. I have not in any way, shape or form attempted to influence anybody. I genuinely want to know what people think. But what we didn't mention was that we had a meeting with the business community in Northgate House, and again there was absolutely no a real understanding of where we're coming from. There was certainly no issues there. I'll hand over to Neil to top up the answer if I could. In terms of the districts and boroughs, I mean, we went with our proposals and we made absolutely clear that is a two-way process. That's not us just saying this is what we're proposing to do. It was absolutely clearly understood. We are listening to views, and we started the process off in Rugby, and Rugby made a very clear view what Rugby views were, as Rugby are wont to do. But that was not true elsewhere, and we spoke to the county as well, and so and we also had consultation with the Federation and with Unison, and then I think Neil wants to add some points there.
I was just going to make the panel aware that we did place adverts in 3 local newspapers. Yeah. Off the top of my head, Stratford, Neaton and Rugby, I believe. Could have been Leamington, I'd have to check, but our media person dealt with that. But they were not insignificant in terms of cost, and it just showed our intent to try and initiate some interest in the consultation, rather than just relying on electronic, digital and physical visitations.
It just seems a little sad that not many people responded to that amount of...
I absolutely agree, and if there are ways to get more people to respond to them, but I mean it's a generalised problem, isn't it?
Yes, if you gave them some options, with some analysis of the implications of options, they might be more willing to consider them, but you didn't give them any options. You just told them, this is what I propose, what do you think?
But just take another supplementary, and then you might be able to formulate your answer to that.
I hear. Yeah, thank you. I hear what you said about consulting with the county council. I understand that the consultation took the form of talking to the leader and the chief executive. With the greatest respect in the world, apart from the fact that this is a hung council anyway, how are you aware that they could give you the views of the county council when the county council hadn't actually didn't know anything more about it than you spoke to the chief executive and the leader?
I'm certainly open to any suggestions at all to ways to improve the process, and if there's something that we can do better, then more than happy to listen to that. In terms of the suggestion about giving the options, I think that would require a very large amount of information. I mean, to say that whereas we are able on the website to give clear indications of that and to point people to the website. I mean, in a newspaper advert, that's all you can do, isn't it? You can't actually lay out in a newspaper advert what the options will be. So I think if I were here now concerned that we've got an inaccurate picture, I would be concerned. I don't think we've got an inaccurate picture. I think that's been borne out by work that's been done elsewhere around the country. So, and as I say, it's something that's brought up with me now. It is being to be raised with me by members of the public that they are concerned. There is a genuine concern now about the message is getting across that police budgets are being squeezed and tightened, and there is genuine concern about whether or not we are going to be able to provide sufficient policing for the public's needs.
Shall I pass on to the second question?
Chair, could I just ask again, what I think it was the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council commented on your consultation. It would be helpful to know what their response was.
Well, my recollection of the meeting was that we went through in broad outline the arguments that I've been through here, and I find this difficult in that I do believe that I think that the council should, if there's a problem with that, then that should be raised with the council. I mean,
It was your consultation, Ron, not theirs.
Chair, can I just, I think this is something that each council needs to take back and discuss in future years. Because it isn't part of the process that you necessarily need to speak to the councils. You decided to do that. In terms, each council has approached that differently. And although I ruled myself out at Nuneaton and Bedworth because of sitting as the chair of the PCP and the deputy leader did it, I think we thought it was more you coming to talk to us. The council is a lot wider than the leader and the chief executive, and the only democratic way is for the entire council to be made aware and to discuss the matter. And if we're going to do that, then we have to have a slightly different process in future years.
That's true. Chair, can I just comment? We followed the established pattern which the police authority laid down. And in every case, borough, district and county, together we met the leader and the chief executive as an informing briefing session about the Commissioner's plans for the budget. We've also said, time and time again, we will attend any scrutiny panel, either at county, borough or district level, on any aspect of the work the Commissioner does. Sadly, the only council that's taken up that opportunity has been Stratford-upon-Avon, where we've had 2 very good sessions with their Overview and Scrutiny Committee. If that's a way forward, democratically, then as you say, it's for councils to seize the initiative.
I think it's something we need to discuss properly at the council level, because, for instance, as the leader of the council, I cannot decide what the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is discussing. That is totally beyond my remit, and that's the idea of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. But I think it's something we all need to discuss, how that's done in future. Shall we pass on then to Councillor Tandy has another question?
Yes, please, rather than a supplementary. I understand how, I read what he said about relating to underspends, Commissioner, but I do have some concerns, and it's about a similar situation in relation to undertaking sufficient scrutiny. How do you feel you would want to share proposals to use any underspends with the police and crime panel? And certainly, I think we would like to know, relating to overspends that have occurred in the same areas, and the possibilities of doing a risk assessment of the possibility of a recurrence of any underspend. Because I think it's very easy simply to present the panel when the deed is done with how you plan to spend your underspends, but I think the police and crime panel would like a better understanding of why they've occurred and how they're going to be spent, rather than just having a report presented to them about how you're actually going to, what you're actually going to spend any underspends on.
I don't think I do need to repeat that question, Chair, because
it was a bit long.
No.
Well, it's the direction of the camera.
It is at the back.
Yeah. Could I pass that over to Treasurer, to Dave Clark?
I'm happy to do that. As a matter of course, we would be happy to provide you with full analysis of our spending position. We ordinarily do. We took the decision today in the light of your considering the precept, that it made more sense for that to be covered in your seminar this morning and covered in summary form. We're happy to provide you with all of the detail on that. As a matter of course, the process that we go through with the force when underspendings occur is we look at all of the areas where underspendings have occurred, and we try to determine what we need to do to prevent the recurrence of those underspendings occurring, and hence the reason why money's been put into the budget next year, for example, for additional HR staff to address the shortfall in recruitment. Hence the reason why I've rewritten the capital planning process from top to bottom to change the way that we look at capital budget management, and hence the reason why we put in a relatively significant uplift in the income budget this year. All of those are areas where we've had repeated underspendings over time, and as a consequence of that, what we're trying to do is to tackle all of the areas. So in terms of looking at risks, we look at the areas where it's happening and try to tackle those. More than happy to share any information on that with the panel.
Could I ask a supplementary? The figure for underspending last year was over 3%, and this year it's currently projected to be over 3% as well, because you allocated some of the underspending to Fund Devonport, which you were going to fund from reserves, hence the reserves are increasing as well. When you came to us last year, Commissioner, this time last year, you had a similar proposal, which was to increase the precept by just under the capital limit, 6.9%, and to use reserves for a longer term strategy. Yet reserves have increased. When you then came to us in June, you said, had I known the situation was going to be as it turned out to be, you had some doubts about whether that was the right strategy. I'd be interested. You did. You indicated when we had the outturn position and so on, and it showed that reserves were increasing and the level of underspending was greater than anticipated. You expressed to us some doubt about whether your strategy going forward would be increasing the precept again in this year, i.e. now. And you said to us that officers would have to justify that to you very carefully. Yeah. Words something like that. I don't remember the exact words. But I wonder what's happened to remove the doubts in your mind and to make you convinced that this is the right strategy. And I think just to follow up on Councillor Tandy's proposal, I would like the panel to have an assurance that you report back on A, the underspending and the reasons for the underspending in more detail. Secondly, you give us some more trend analysis, because I think the historic position is important going forward, and because you're not proposing to make any provision for underspending in your medium-term financial plan. I understand not making provision for underspending in the budget, but in the medium-term financial plan, which is a broad view about the future, if underspending continues, then clearly there's something you could make allowance for in your medium-term financial plan, because it will reduce the need for reserves. And could you also give us an assurance that you will report back to us on the use of underspendings, and rather than having a strategy that is opportunistic, if some underspendings occur, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do the other. But I would like to see a more strategic approach and a more considered approach to the use of underspendings rather than an opportunistic one.
In terms of when we became aware this year of the magnitude of the underspend, that was not until very late on in 2014. The magnitude of the underspend was not aware. We were not aware of that until that September. Yeah. And given what we were planning to do and then what we had instructed the force to do, that should not have happened. Now, that's I don't know that there's anything that we could have done differently. What we did when we became aware of that underspend was said we need to get a handle on this and set up what we call a star chamber with both deputy commissioners and both deputy chief constables, and that is now monitoring this much more closely, and certainly in terms of recruitment, we have our eyes very firmly on that. One of the things that I did not refer to in my introductory remarks is what we've said about recruitment, and I was quite specific to say in terms of officer numbers, we're talking about 2016. I think the new work programme, I think the reductions in the budget are so large, and even with what we're looking at already, that I would have to think very hard about what commitment I could give about numbers following on from 2016. And the implication there is that we are going to have a look at that recruitment campaign and whether we don't need to slow that down, in fact, because with 80+% of the costs being in salaries, we do not want to start committing ourselves, because as you know, if you hire a police officer, you get them for 30 years. It's not a case of something that you can turn on and turn off. So already the constraints are forcing us to review that recruitment strategy. In terms of the more technical stuff, in terms of the information that you would like, again, do you mind if I pass that back to Dave?
Robin and I have had fairly long discussions about this at the Budget Working Group, and Robin knows that I am in a very different place to him, in that I don't think it's reasonable to anticipate future years' underspendings and include them within the medium-term financial plan. And one of the things I did after the last but one Budget Working Groups was really undertake an exercise to determine whether that's my personal prejudice or that's the view of other people, because I am genuinely not aware of any organisation, local authority or policing organisation, that does take account of future years' underspends in making its medium-term financial plans. I'm not aware of a single one. I raised it at the police treasurers' meetings, and I asked two questions. First of all, does anyone do that? Does anyone anticipate? Because most policing areas have increased in reserves, and I think over the life of the CSR, reserves have only gone down in 3 policing areas. I think it's only 3. So most are in the same position that Warwickshire is in. First of all, I wanted to determine whether anyone does it, and secondly, and this is the really important point from my perspective, when people make their Section 25 statement, and the Section 25 statement is the one where the Treasurer signs off the budget as soundly based and providing for adequate reserves, whether they do so on the basis of the annual budget or whether they do so, as I do, on the basis of the medium-term financial plan, rather than simply the annual budget. The message I got back from everybody is nobody does this, and secondly, everyone bases their Section 25 statement on the annual budget plus the medium-term financial plans. And you have to do that in a situation where you are anticipating substantial expenditure reductions in future years. It is simply not tenable to... anyone can balance the first year's budget, but if you actually, in balancing the first year's budget, make your future year's budgets undeliverable, then you do not have a budget which is soundly based. And as a consequence of that, it's crucially important to look over the medium term in making that judgment about whether the budget is soundly based. And if you look over the medium term and you have provided for both authorising expenditure and assuming that expenditure, you can then spend that money again, in my view, that does not make the budget soundly based. And so I don't think I would be prepared to issue, in fact I'm absolutely certain, I wouldn't be prepared to sign the Section 25 statement off and say that I think that budget would be soundly based, because I simply do not think it is. I think it's entirely appropriate that you call the Commissioner to account for the prudent use of the reserves that he has, and for ensuring that there is a degree of taxpayer equity and that reserves accumulated from today's taxpayers are spent for the benefit of today's taxpayers. I don't think it's in any way, shape or form reasonable that you ask the Commissioner to assume that there will be further underspendings in future years which he can then plan to use today. I think it's only reasonable to make that judgment once the reserves have actually been accumulated.
And just to make it absolutely clear, that is the advice I get, and that is the advice that I will stick to.
Thank you. Shall we pass then to Councillor Poole?
No depend on base budget. So one question, but three answers. Okay.
Yep.
Can you tell us more about the thorough reassessment of the base budget? Who undertook the exercise? Where it was reported? And what was the result, please?
You don't need to repeat that because the camper was directed to Councillor Poole.
Again, you'll get a more comprehensive, more detailed answer from Dave. So.
Well, I'm going to pass it. One of the parts of the question was who undertook it, so I'm going to pass over to the person that undertook, or whose staff undertook it, which is Nicola Roth, who's the head of finance within the force. Nicola can explain what was done in terms of the base budget review.
Okay, thank you. So we focused on 4 primary areas really. As the Commissioner alluded to before, 80% of our budget is based around pay. So the first focus was on the budgets for officer pay and staff pay. The budgets for officer pay were scrutinised in line with the revised recruitment plans and to ensure that the budgets were completely in line with HR achievable plans following the review of the HR recruitment plans. Why the officer budget has actually gone down is because we've sort of tightened up on how we budget for officer costs, because when new officers come in and when we're recruiting quickly, the new officers are cheaper than the officers that are exiting, because the officers that are exiting the organisation have normally done 30 years, so they've worked their way up the pay scale. So we did a really thorough analysis to make sure that our pay budgets are as tight as they can be, and that's reflected in the budget report in section 4. You'll see we presented an analysis of the movement, and within that we've broken it down to staff pay and officer pay to show you all of the sort of steps that were included in that review. We also focused on our two big areas of non-pay, and that was ICT and estates. They're our big areas where we've got some big budgets in non-pay, and previously, in previous financial years, they're areas that had historically underspent as well, and that's linked to the performance of the capital programme. So one of the accountants in my team sat with the budget managers for those areas and went through on a line-by-line basis every single budget within estates and ICT and linked that up to the future capital programme and based it on all the things that we know we need to spend money on for future plans. And you can see again in the analysis of the movement of the budget, in the last section, the savings removed from the budget, we've itemised in there the savings that were realised from that zero-based review of property and ICT budgets. And we also looked at the income budgets. Income budgets previously, the forces had sort of always been quite cautious when putting income budgets in, because particularly around mutual aid, which is where we get money from other forces when we go and support them, it's quite difficult to predict what that activity can be in year. But we've looked at the trends of income budgets over the previous years, and then we've used that analysis to build on the work we did last year to put those income budgets at a more realistic target. So they're the areas that we focused on in the main. It's very difficult to do a zero base of every single budget, but we've taken the big hits for this year, and then some of the other budgets around non-pay, such as supplies and services and uniforms and things like that, they're going to be the focus of next year's budget. So we've still got some areas to look at, but we did hit all of the main areas in terms of pay, ICT, estates and income in this year's budget review.
Okay. Can I just pick up the issue in terms of how because you also asked how it's reported.
Yeah.
In the first instance, it's discussed between the force finance team with me and Rob, and we go through that in detail. We have further discussions on the budget and the outcome of the reviews at the Alliance Governance Group, which is both of the commissioners, both chief constables and the force command team, and myself and the chief executives. And then we have further meetings on a monthly basis with Ron and Eric in Warwickshire and Bill Longmore and his deputy Gary Sheldon in West Mercia, where we take them through the budget in the budget build up in detail.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mawson.
Thank you, Chair. Mine is relating to the base budget again. On page 7, could you please explain the reduction in the minimum revenue provisions, please?
Can we talk about it with one?
Yeah.
Go on.
the minimum revenue budget, that's an amount of money that we have to set aside within the revenue budget to contribute towards our borrowing for the capital programme. It's linked to the capital programme. It links into the assessments of how we monitor capital that the Treasurer has put forward, and explained that a little bit earlier today. And part of that, basically, because we had based our capital programme on the programmes that we thought would happen, so the good ideas, and sometimes some of those programmes didn't come into fruition. So when we looked at the revenue impact of that, it was calculated on a big programme, a big spend, and then in realistic terms, not all of that programme got delivered, so we didn't end up using all of the MRP, the abbreviation for that, in the revenue budget. So in the assessments, when we did the review of the revenue budget, we also looked at the calculations for MRP, the fact that we did a revenue contribution to capital in the last financial year, which means that we didn't need to borrow, and the new way that we're going to monitor the capital programme and build the capital programme, we've been able to relook at our budget requirements within revenue for the MRP and also for the loan interest, which is the other item that appears there.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I add to that? We've had 2 references to the base budget. There is an inescapable fact. The base budget by 2018-19 will have to be cut by 10 to 11 million. That's the stark reality of the base budget. Today's proposed precept increase is taking a medium-term strategic view to address that. That's the critical issue about the base budget.
Councillor, sorry, I'm giving you a second. Bob Malloy.
Commissioner, your medium-term financial plan makes the assumption that the council tax base will increase by 2% a year, which is quite a lot over the 5-year period. I'm going back a few years, but my recollection of the last medium-term financial plan that I was involved in the days of the old police authority, that the assumption was far, far less than that. So is that realistic, 2% a year increase in council tax base over 5 years? Or are you being over-optimistic there?
Can I just clarify the question? I've just been asked about the proposal. The medium-term financial plan is proposing effectively a 2% increase in the precept over that period, every year for that period. Is that realistic? Can I just check for the basis of the question? Are you asking, do you think it will be achievable to do that? Is that the?
It sounds very optimistic to me. So if you can justify that, I'd be interested to hear it.
Again, could I hand over to Dave, and then I've got some comments to make.
Happy to comment, Commissioner. The long-term trend in the tax base, and I know all about the long-term trend because I've been around for so long that the long-term trend in the tax base was always around about 2% in Warwickshire. Some years it was slightly over 2%, some years it was under 2%. Through the recession of the last few years, that dipped very significantly, and dipped on the basis that developers weren't building houses. Simple as that. That's what uplifts the tax base. Is simply additional properties being built. And that had dipped, and I think in the last medium-term financial plan that we did for the police authority, I think it was 1%, possibly even less than 1%. I suspect it might have been different in different years. It might have been 0.5% for 1 or 2 years, and then a sort of return up to about 1. But at some point in time, I expect that to return to trend. And the fundamental reason why I've included it this year in the medium-term financial plan at 2% is simplistically that there is, as you're aware, something of a housing crisis in the country. There is an expectation of a significant uplift in population over the next few years, and houses haven't been being built and need to be built at some pace to address that. I've seen sort of population projections for Warwickshire, which are significant, projecting significant increases in population. We know of significant development that's taking part in different parts of the country, things like the Rugby Mass site and whatever. And it seems to me that the likelihood is that the council tax base increase is much more likely to return to trend and possibly exceed trend over the next few years, and hence the reason for the increase to 2%. Whether that will pan out equally across the county, I suspect not. Because, for example, certainly in the last version of the regional spatial strategy, for example, that was published, there was very limited development in North Warwickshire and a lot of development in Warwick, for example. Now, I suspect that what we'll see are uplifts at different paces in different places, but I think 2% is probably more akin to what we were expecting. Actually, on the last refresh of the medium-term financial plan, we had 1% uplift for 2015-16 and 2% for the future years, and what's actually come out in 15-16 is something closer to 2%. It's about 1.9% if I remember rightly. So it's virtually at trend now.
Thank you.
Councillor Maurice Jones.
Thank you, Chair. May I please ask, how will the Commissioner measure the value for money element of the £2 million allocation over the next 4 years for tackling crime in the rural areas, crime afflicting industry, commerce and retailing, and cyber crime? And would he please advise his achievements up to date?
Well, as you say, the allocation across the Alliance is £1.5 million a year to cover cyber, rural and business. What we have done to date is set up groups, particularly in all of those areas, and they are beginning to address the problem. So, as of now, I would not be able to give you an assessment of that. It's too early in the process. But in terms of value for money, there actually has been some work being done in terms of. Funnily enough, I was in the Home Office yesterday talking to somebody in HMIC, and they are developing a tool to work out effectively the cost of each crime, and so that when that work is developed, I was really quite interested in this. That would be a specific way of doing exactly what you're asking. But what as I mentioned earlier, I see the Chief Constable on a weekly basis, and we go through analyse the figures, and so I will be keeping my eye on what's happening in terms of those figures, and obviously just having a look at the money that's being spent. Sorry, Neil, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to make the councillor aware that we're already scheduled to give a detailed update on the next Policing Crime Panel meeting on that element you've asked a question about. It is fairly early, and the groups are established, and we've already allocated a significant amount of money, but it's early for the projects. So by the end of April, which is when we're due to report back, we should be able to give you some detail around what kind of initiatives are taking place, what kind of groups we've got going, and hopefully get some form of outcome information for you. Rather than now, it's too premature, I think.
Good. Councillor Nicola Davis.
On the revenue budget for 2015-16, it shows that 717,000 is allocated under a line that says other growth and additions, and I just wondered what that includes.
So can you just, for the sake of the public who might be watching, the £717,000 allocated on the 15-16 revenue budget to
Or other growth and additions.
Other growth and additions.
I can briefly answer that, if that's okay. It's a number of smaller adjustments to the budget. It's mainly to do with an increase, I think, in the insurance contracts and other various smaller contracts that weren't it was appropriate to list them all out because otherwise you'd have a whole page of different editions. So it's an amalgamation of lots of smaller editions, but I know some of the bigger ones in there are an increase in the cost of insurance and some of the smaller contracts.
We have got a list of those. We have got a list of those that we can circulate to the group if necessary. But as Rob said, there's some smaller growth items that come through. We monitor business cases as the year goes on. So if somebody's got a good idea for something to happen, or there's a need, something changes in the regulation, and we need to do things differently, and there's a cost attached to that, a business case has to be produced, and that's scrutinised. If there's a cost attached to that, we then keep track of that and we build it into the next year's budget. But as Rob said, because there's quite a few of them that just add up to that amount, they're all quite minor. We don't list them all in here, but we have got a separate list that we can circulate if needs be.
Just it seems quite a significant increase from last year. You know, it's getting on for 2/3 of a 3/4 of a million. So it's quite a lot. More things are topping up quite significantly to make that. I'd be quite interested just to see what it does involve.
More than happy to provide that.
Robin Burso.
Can I ask you just a detailed question about 350,000 additional resource for victim services?
Yeah.
And the implication in the narrative that isn't built into the base, it's one-off funding, is that correct?
And now my understanding is that is what we are now paying. Victim support are... Sorry, I ought to repeat the question, shouldn't I? Let me just, for the sake of the public, repeat the question. There's a £350,000 item to cover victim services, and the question is whether that is a one-off payment or whether that's an ongoing payment. As I alluded to earlier, again, in case the public aren't aware of this, the provision of victim services has been transferred to my office now, and what we did was a comprehensive assessment of what was available in the way of providers for victim services. It's a lengthy piece and detailed piece of work, which I notice Chris Lewis isn't here. One of my policy officers, Chris Lewis, did it. And where we eventually got to was that frankly, the only realistic provider at the moment would be victim support, who there are lots of good things with that decision, in that we were dealing with people who we know, because they are existing staff. But what was also part of the process is it was made absolutely clear that we would have to be offering enhanced, better services to victims than we were in the past, and to more victims. If we were to honour the Victims' Code, then we would need to do more than was being done in the past. And so the contract that we eventually agreed that sum is the excess over what the Ministry of Justice allocated to us to provide victim services. So this is one of those rather annoying features where the government lay and say, we are going to put victims at the heart of everything we do, etc., and make all these grand announcements, and then don't give us enough money to do what effectively they are promising to victims.
Can I just follow? Is that just one-off additional money, or is it built into the base?
If you think back to the presentation I made this morning, Robin, it's in the budget for 1 year only, but it'll be something that's reviewed at the end of next year, and it's one of the areas where I indicated that if we do underspend in future years, it's one of the things that would be one of the Commissioner's priorities for future years.
I don't think that's good strategic planning. Whether it's required in future years, it's not required in future years. You shouldn't be reliant on underspending.
But sorry, can I just chip in? The transfer of victim services to the Commissioner is a brand new responsibility for the Commissioner, and there's a lot of uncertainty around the number of users. The remit that we've got is actually wider than the national remit that's been there previously, and it's also a very young and immature market. As the Commissioner pointed out, there's only really one provider of that service, and it took probably a great deal of negotiation on behalf of the Office of PCC to actually get a contract within the costing envelope MOJ had given us. So this funding really is there to help provide enhanced services, but also to help develop that market. So when we look again next year to renew a contract and go out, there's hopefully a bit more negotiating power, and we'll have a better idea really of how much usage we have from victim support, how much they actually use and numbers, but also how much added value the enhanced services give us.
Just to help you with the kind of what seems to be a short-term type of initiative, I mean, this money is essentially we embarked upon supporting some pretty key projects for victims. I'm talking about victims of rape, serious sexual offences and domestic abuse last year, and those projects were supported by the victim commissioning money last year, which was used to, well, principally, which should have been used to instigate, support, capacity build, victim services in the county in the run up to this award of this contract in April. And what we found is, unexpectedly, the contract with victim support came out far more expensive than we thought, which meant there was nothing left in that money from certain MOJ to support the ongoing work of those key victim services. So on that basis, the Commission had two choices: commission general support to victims of crime, which takes all the MOJ money, or find some other money to continue with those projects which are principally linked to people's pay. In other words, we're paying for a service from other organisations to deliver that service. And the Commissioner took the view that the 350 was necessary and could be justified on the basis of the risk and harm that those services were managing. We will have the same difficulty next year, and I think what Rob's alluded to is that at some point, yes, we will be in a better position once the contracts run for a year to see if they are supporting 16,000 victims of crime, because if they're not, then we will be going back to victim support and clawing back some of the funds that have been allocated. So it really is a case of, it's the first year, it's not clear entirely what it looks like, but the bottom line for us was supporting those victims, and that's why that's appeared this year.
Okay. Councillor Tandy.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the Capital Programme Commissioner, and having been a councillor for many years, I am well aware that capital programmes can change considerably even within a year, with funding coming in and funding going out. But can you tell me, please, or could you answer how much of the £2.2 million spent in 2015 is due to slippage, and how that slippage is managed? And the further point that I'm interested in is how will you, as the Commissioner, monitor the new capital planning process?
Again, I think the most sensible thing I can do is pass that.
Rob's looking for the slippage figure. We may not have it for Warwickshire, we may just have it across the Alliance, but there's an element of it which is about slippage. In terms of the way that the capital planning process will be managed, it's probably worth me saying, first of all, what we've changed in relation to the capital planning process, because the Budget Working Party group have seen that, but you as a committee haven't done that. What essentially we found when we reviewed the capital planning process was there were two types of projects, broadly two types of projects, and I'm oversimplifying this greatly, but simply there were a series of projects which had been approved, had a business case produced, had a feasibility done, and were included and were ready to run or were running. And then there were other projects that would better be described as really wish list projects, which weren't at the same stage, in some instances, weren't at the starting gate. And the ones that were slipping, unsurprisingly, were that latter with that latter group. So what we've introduced is a process whereby, rather than the production of the capital programme, the capital budget being an annual event, we've turned it into a continuous process. And we've split the capital programme into two. We split it into a capital projects listing and a capital budget. The capital budget, which is what you have before you now, only includes projects which have had a business case produced, which have had a feasibility, and which are either running or at the point where they can run successfully. The capital projects listing includes all of the projects that are proposed to be undertaken at whatever stage they are, and the intention is to analyse all projects by the stage in their life, because simplistically some of the stages can take between next to no time at all or years, and planning is the classic example of that, where something can go through planning approvals in a few weeks, or it can end up in an inquiry and take several years, and you can see significant delays in the process. And we wanted to get to a stage where the Commissioner was in a position whereby we could understand that. So we've changed the planning basis. The other thing that we've changed within this is the nature of accountability, because what became very clear is delivery of the capital programme to timescales, to the timescales identified within the capital programme, wasn't seen as something which was critical within the force. It wasn't something which was seen as critical to delivery of the force objectives. And the reality is that probably reflected reality up till now. It certainly doesn't reflect reality going forward, because we've talked about some fairly aggressive savings targets going forward. Some of those future savings targets are dependent on capital expenditure taking place to time, particularly around ICT developments and to a lesser extent some around development of the estate. So delivering capital projects on time now becomes absolutely critical. So what we've done is change the nature of the accountability, and this is a new scheme, June. So this has only been in place for a few weeks. But what will be happening now is responsible officers, i.e. that's the person who's taking responsibility for the project, and chief constables will be called to account at the regular meetings of the Alliance Governance Group by the two commissioners, and all projects which slip will have to report on the reason for slippage and what's being done to try to recoup any slippage to the two commissioners. So what we're trying to introduce, change accountability. So rather than accountability being through the force, with the commissioners simply getting periodic monitoring reports around the capital programme and getting very frustrated, as we all do, with capital programme slippage. What we've done now is change accountability for the delivery of the projects, and therefore the spending, directly through to the commissioners themselves, and taking it beyond the force. And that is simply working on the presumption that the one thing that will stop slippage more than anything else is the prospect of the responsible officer having to come in front of the commissioner and explain why they're late with the project. And I don't make any excuses for making that sound heavy-handed. It's intended to be heavy-handed because it's intended to stop slippage.
Thank you, Dave.
Just to add, because you have a figure, the only figure we've got is for across the Alliance, and there's 6 million of slippage across the Alliance going into 15-16. But I haven't got a breakdown for Warwickshire, but I can provide that.
If you would, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any final question? In that case, then we have to deliberate as to whether we accept the Commissioner's proposed precept, and to start that into discussion, I'll propose that the panel note the Commissioner's proposed precept for 2015-16. Is that seconded? Seconded. Is there an amendment to that?
I propose a veto, Chair. Please.
Do we? In council. No council. You must vote on the amendment first. Well, I'll just check first of all. There's been a proposal that we note the Commissioner's proposed precept. The amendment is that there is a veto from Councillor Poole.
And just to be clear on that motion, I think the motion would be that the precept is too high and should not be the precept for this financial year, just to be
That's
clear
correct.
on the veto
Budget has to be.
effectively means and what it should be.
Yes. Okay. Is that seconded?
I second it, Ken.
That's seconded. So I vote on the, unless there needs to be any discussion.
And again, to be clear, that requires a 2/3 majority, which is effectively 8 members from the panel.
For a veto. So, it's been, the amendment is that there is a veto of the Commissioner's proposed precept. All those in favour of that? And those against? Veto. So that's 3 in favour and 9, so that is lost. So those in favour of noting the Commissioner's proposed precept for 2015-16, all those in favour? And those against? Thank you very much, that's agreed.
Thank you.
We have to make a report to the Commissioner on the proposed precept, and the report can include recommendations. So we decided to note the actual precept. Do we want to include any recommendations regarding consultation or any of the things that were mentioned earlier?
Chair, that was one of my concerns throughout this whole process, was the level of consultation and how it was undertaken. I would like us to put a note into those proposals. It's one of the reasons why I have to think very hard about which way I voted on this. That and the issue of the underspends was another one. But I do want to see a better level of consultation, and I would appreciate that going into any report that we put back.
Councillor
I
President.
very much support the council.
And some assurance.
Seeing general support for that, would we? And perhaps that could be brought back to the panel for discussion during the year.
Absolutely.
And some assurances about the underspending.
Yeah, the underspends.
I
I think we need a better understanding of how the underspends would be dealt with, Chairman.
So we ask the Commissioner to come back and discuss with us the method of consultation and the underspends.
Yep.
Yes? Councillor Mawson?
Could we also add, like we normally do, some sort of column in, instead of having a blank 1.99%, what the budget would be, or the precept would be at 0% or 4% or whatever that is. So we've got something to look at and grapple with.
Well, what I was thinking was that if the Commissioner comes back to us to discuss during the year, and the method of consultation, we can discuss how that's done. At
How
that
that's
point,
going to be done in future.
as to how it's going to be done.
Chair, can I ask a practical issue? Would it be worthwhile trying to deal with that through the budget working group, so it has some refinement before it gets to the full police and crime panel? Because we do have a very close working relationship between our office and the budget working group, and it would seem sensible to iron out any flaws, if you like, before it gets to the panel.
That could be discussed at the next budget working group, whether that is the way forward.
All I'm thinking, Chair, is they may not want to take on that responsibility, but that's their
That's a separate thing, because we have to make a report on this at the moment. And so that's something that
If they choose that they don't want to do that, then it will be a police and crime panel
It would,
issue.
yes. Okay, we happy then? We finished that particular part of the agenda. Item 8M work programme. Consider the updated work programme and future areas of activity. Anything else to add to the report? Are we going to accept that?
Agreed.
There have been no other urgent items brought to my attention or the office's attention. Date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 24th of April at 10 o'clock at Nuneaton in Bedworth Borough Council, where I trust you'll be extremely safe.
Is that safe?
They are busy selling many, many houses at £400,000 in Nuneaton. And listening this morning, I do have to wonder if it's the same town I live in. But, perhaps it changes after.
County council tax, though.
Is that physically safe or safe from hostile questioning?
Well, it's well protected by the council CCTV system during daylight hours.
Very good.
We all happy then? There are no complaints.
No.
All right, to me, there have been no complaints.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, can I thank everybody for their attendance?